Anticipated medium-term budget statement later today. I understand it's happening at 2 o'clock. Let's go back to Arabile Gumede live in Parliament. Hey, Arabile.
Yeah, good afternoon. Well, still good morning, Blaine, isn't it? We just have under 3 hours to go now until Finance Minister Tito Mboweni does serve out that medium-term budget policy statement. It is his first. He's only been in office just around 2 weeks. But let's talk about the tax implications here. It's usually not a mid-term budget where you'd get the tax pronouncements, but perhaps some hints of what will come out in budget in February. But it certainly can be a time to reflect and to see just how things are faring and what other changes could be constituted in South Africa. For that discussion, I'm joined by two gentlemen, Reg de Swart, who is a tax partner at EY, and of course Afzal Khan as well from Raft Consulting. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. I suppose we can kick things right off, Reg. Let's talk about the implications thus far of where South Africa sits with our taxes. Are we perhaps in a better place than we would have been perhaps a year ago even?
Arabile, I agree with what you just said, that today is not necessarily the day that we will hear significant tax changes or tax increases. I guess the big question today is where are we? And usually with a medium-term budget policy statement, that's the question on everybody's mind. Today is an update. The question is SARS collecting the revenue that was budgeted for the year? And if not, what are we going to do about that? And from a tax perspective, that's probably the most significant outcome of what we're expecting to see today.
Yeah, it's probably so much harder to just set the priorities straight for the country, set them in motion, and even worse when you've only been in office for 2 weeks, I suppose. But at this point, is there anything he could hint at with regards to taxes, or is it a case of let's wait and see?
I would suspect in this budget they'd want to say something about what's going to happen in February. Reg is right, they're not going to do much more. What the public would like to know, though, is operational questions. So this thing about e-filing that's going around, tell us something about that. SARS's restructure, are we now in a good space? Have we come back from where we were? So I think that would be important to give comfort to the public at large, to say SARS is in a good space, we know what we're doing, we're on track with the work, our e-filing system is fine. Those types of things don't talk to actual technical taxes, but more the health of the revenue collector.
Yeah. Would you say we have a revenue or an expenditure problem then?
Oh, that's a good question. I think your economists from this morning are talking about the expenditure side. From a revenue side, I think on collections, they're going to talk about some divisions have done well, others haven't. So it will be interesting to see. They're probably going to try to retract, give some bad news now. So maybe they can give us good news in February in terms of their collection targets. They do need to do something about overall cost burden because taxes are at ceilings. I don't know that we can go above any of those ceilings. So they do need to look at cost cutting. I don't know where they're going to get other money from, other than perhaps the mining sector.
Yeah. Everything from PAYE to VAT has been hard hit. Even corporate taxes, surely. And in an economy that is in recession, you probably find it's even harder for companies to continue to paying taxes. Do you think that the will to do so and the will to help then in an economy like this is still there from corporates?
I do think so, but I do think we also need to recognize that you don't tax yourself out of a recession. The big question now is what can we do from a treasury perspective to stimulate the economy? Increasing taxes is not going to do that. I agree that maybe we will hear some hints of some taxes that will increase or new taxes introduced that will happen next year. There may be some hints of that today. Other than that, I don't expect much more. Maybe one thing that we might see is, we know since the VAT rate is increased, there's been talk about some products that should be VAT-free. Yeah. Maybe we hear some firm commitments as to what that's going to be. There was a team that investigated that with some proposals, and maybe the minister pronounces on what will happen on that effect. If so, it's not going to be immediate. That will only be implemented from next year in any way.
Yeah. Also at the same time, we had something called a price cap, perhaps, that was mooted about around the 93 petrol. Would something like that change the income South Africa gets from fuel?
That will be interesting. It will be really interesting to see exactly how they break down the price of fuel if you put a cap on it. The reality is, from a revenue perspective, we are dependent on the fuel levies that's included in the price. If we let go part of that, the question is going to be what will then fill that hole. What we need to understand is that all government's revenue comes from taxes. There's nothing else. And if we let go of one tax, like a fuel levy, for example, to cap price, if that's the plan, then that amount of tax needs to come from somewhere else.
Do we need to start being a little more creative when it comes to not just our collection of taxes, but where it happens from?
So the coming days is going to be the stimulus package discussion, and business is going to be coming to government. So when business comes to government, they want to hear, what are you going to do to stimulate? So you can't say, well, we're going to increase taxes. So to stimulate, it looks like what they probably will do, the taxation law amendment bill, which is probably in its final stages, has extended the employment tax incentive for another 5 years to 2024. So they will probably talk about that to say this is a stimulus for job creation. So if you use the ETI more effectively and employ double the number of staff that you would, this is the benefit you're going to get from them. The SETAs come into play, because the SETAs give you money back in terms of learnerships. So I think it should be rather about education and upskilling. Fees must fall is one of the biggest things in the economy in terms of discussion. But should it happen at a tertiary level, should that money not go to primary and secondary education and let business sort out tertiary? If I'm a businessman, if you put quality graduates, I will employ them and I will bursar them. But you need to have an education system that pushes them up. So throw the money at the bottom. Naturally the cream will end up at the top, and the business will start funding that. From a government perspective, they need to start thinking like that. The problem is next year's an election. So we need a public and a voting population that thinks long term. We have a fantastic president. The president that we've got at the moment, he's the right guy to take us forward. But you actually need everybody to come to party, and we need stability in those top positions. We can't have people chopping and changing, because if you have a plan, the moment you have somebody new, you're going to have another boss barrage to come up with a new plan. People are talking RDP ideas. NDP is RDP in a different way. So the ideas are there. I don't think we should look for new ideas. Take the ideas that have worked and implement.
Gentlemen, I'm going to get you out of the heat. It's absolutely hot, and I can tell you right now that it's going to be absolutely boiling in there as well. The finance minister is, of course, here. He is indeed here, having been in Lekgotla not so long ago, having spoken to cabinet as well, unpacking some of the issues, perhaps a few tweaks here and there to the speech. Who knows? But the sentiment here is clear that it needs to be cohesive, it needs to be coherent, and it needs to be a message that will surely project the future of South Africa and that growth path for the medium term with regards to its framework over the next 3 years. We'll continue to unpack it for you here and across the day. Do stay tuned, of course, to SABC for that.
Yeah, I guess it's all about growing an inclusive economy, isn't it, Arabile? Thank you very much indeed for your time. We'll catch up with you a little later on. Arabile Gumede live for us in Parliament.